Haley Mason, at 28, never imagined her family's Thanksgiving dinner would end with her being kicked out. What her status-obsessed father and the rest of her family didn't know as they showed her the door was that she was worth $94 million. The startup she'd built from nothing, the one they dismissed as her little computer hobby, had made her wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. As she drove away that night, a new resolve settled in. She'd cut them off from the anonymous financial support she had been providing. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, stick around. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy family karma stories as satisfying as pumpkin pie. Growing up in the affluent Boston suburb of Wellesley, our family looked perfect on the outside. Our colonial home with its manicured lawn and luxury cars projected the exact image my parents wanted. My father, Richard Mason, was a cutthroat investment banker who valued achievement above all else. He measured success in dollar signs and status symbols, collecting country club memberships and business connections, like trophies. My mother, Diane, was a former beauty queen turned socialite who orchestrated our family's social calendar with military precision. With her highlighted hair, tennis-stoned figure, and perpetual string of pearls, she was the quintessential banker's wife. Her greatest accomplishment, as she often reminded us, was marrying well and maintaining appearances. In this carefully cultivated garden, my older brother Tyler bloomed as the golden child, mirroring our father in every way that mattered. Captain of the lacrosse team, an Ivy League business school graduate, and eventually an associate at our father's firm, he was groomed to take over the family business. My younger sister Brooke was my mother's perfect project. With her natural beauty and social grace, she effortlessly collected pageant crowns and popularity. My parents praised her for her social conquests and her engagement to a man from a good family. And then there was me, sandwiched awkwardly between these two paragons of Mason family values. From an early age, I gravitated toward books and computers instead of social events and cosmetics. My room wasn't decorated with sports trophies or pageant crowns. It was filled with disassembled computer parts and programming books that no one ever mentioned at family gatherings. My mother would say, "Haley, why don't you put down that computer? Social connections are what matter in life." My father was more direct. When I won the state science competition, he asked, "Is it going to get you into Harvard Business School?" He missed my regional showcase to attend Tyler's golf tournament, explaining, "That's real-world success." Even Thanksgiving dinners became showcases for the family hierarchy. While Tyler was asked detailed questions about market trends, and Brooke was praised for her latest social conquest, I was relegated to passing dishes and receiving the occasional pat on the head. My mother would offer, vaguely, Haley's doing well in her math classes before quickly pivoting to Tyler's internship or Brooke's modeling opportunity. I learned early to keep my achievements private, celebrating my accomplishments alone. This pattern continued through high school. I graduated valedictorian, but the achievement was downplayed at my graduation party, which somehow evolved into a pre-celebration for Tyler. "Your brother's entering the business world," my father announced proudly. "He'll be making the Mason name proud on Wall Street." The implied comparison hung in the air. My academic achievement was nice, but insignificant. College selection brought our family dynamics into sharp relief. Tyler had attended my father's alma mater with a generous donation. Brooke chose Vassar, where my mother had connections. When I received a full academic scholarship to MIT for computer science, my parents' reaction was lukewarm. "MIT is so technical," my mother said with a grimace. My father was blunter. "What kind of career path is that for a Mason? You could do business or law and actually make something of yourself." Despite their objections, I chose MIT partly because it was my dream school, and partly because the scholarship meant financial independence. While my siblings' educations were fully funded, I worked part-time jobs to cover my living expenses, determined to stand on my own. Those college years marked the beginning of my emotional separation from the family. At MIT, surrounded by fellow tech enthusiasts, I finally found my people. My roommate Alicia became the first person to truly support my passion without qualification. My professors also noticed my talent. Dr. Ramirez, my advanced algorithms professor, pulled me aside and said, "Mason, that security protocol you developed has real-world applications. Have you considered where you might take this after graduation?" I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from several major tech companies. My graduation ceremony perfectly illustrated my family's values. My parents and siblings arrived late, left early for a friend's engagement party. I'd asked more questions about the catering than my thesis. As we posed for a quick family photo, my father glanced at his watch impatiently. "Well, at least you finished," he said. "Now you can look for a proper position at a respected firm. I have some contacts at Goldman who might take a meeting." I smiled politely, but had already made my decision. Instead of the corporate job they expected, I had something much bigger in mind. I gathered my courage and said, "Actually, I'm going to start my own tech company." The look of confused disappointment on my father's face fueled my determination for years to come. The summer after graduation, while my MIT classmates accepted lucrative positions at Google and Amazon, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Cambridge. This would be the headquarters for what I hoped would become my tech empire. My father scoffed. "Cybersecurity. That's a fancy term for IT work. You'll be fixing printers in 6 months when this falls apart." Those early days tested every ounce of my determination. I worked around the clock, surviving on ramen noodles and coffee. I found a partner in Jason Kim, a brilliant programmer from MIT. Unlike my family, Jason immediately grasped the potential of what I was building. He invested his savings alongside mine, and together we officially founded SecureFlow. Our first year was brutal, filled with rejection from investors who couldn't see past our youth. We took consulting gigs to keep the lights on. There were moments I nearly broke, like when my credit card was declined while buying groceries the same day Tyler called to brag about his new BMW, or when I had to miss Christmas because we couldn't afford a plane ticket and my mother said, "I suppose your little computer project is more important than family." 18 months into our venture, we hit a breakthrough. Our latest algorithm showed a 98.7% success rate at detecting and neutralizing advanced threats. We documented the results and sent our findings to Alexis Rivera, the security director at Meridian Technologies, a company that had recently experienced a major data breach. Rivera responded within hours, saying, "This is exactly what we've been looking for. Can you meet tomorrow?" That meeting changed everything. Rivera not only purchased our security package, but connected us with her professional network. "What you've built here isn't just an improvement," she told us as she signed the contract. "It's a new paradigm in threat detection." With Meridian as our first major client, doors began to open. Over the next year, we expanded from my apartment to a small office and then a larger space as we added employees. Each success felt like vindication. When a tech magazine featured our software, I sent a copy to my parents. My father's response was tepid, "Interesting little write-up. Let me know when you're ready for a real job if this doesn't pan out." 3 years after founding SecureFlow, our client list included financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government contractors. Our team had grown to 27 people, and we were consistently profitable. Yet, even as the business flourished, I maintained a modest lifestyle. At family gatherings, my growing business remained my computer job, always discussed with faint condescension. I stopped trying to explain the significance of our company's growth. Then came the call that would transform everything. Andrea Winters, VP of Acquisitions at SecureTech Global, one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the world, requested a meeting. "We've been watching SecureFlow's development with great interest," she said. "Your adaptive response protocol is years ahead of the industry." The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end, Winters had laid out an acquisition offer. $188 million for SecureFlow. The number was so large it seemed unreal. After taxes and honoring our agreements with early supporters, Jason and I each walked away with just over $94 million. "What will you do now?" Jason asked as we finished our celebratory dinner. I considered the question carefully. "I think I'll keep things mostly the same for now," I said. "And honestly, I'm not ready to tell my family yet." Jason understood immediately. "You want to see if they'll ever value what you've built without knowing about the money?" "Exactly," I nodded. "The moment they know about the acquisition, everything will change, and I'm not ready for that yet." So I made a decision that would later prove fateful. I kept the acquisition quiet. Outside of our company and the necessary financial professionals, no one knew about my newfound wealth. I invested wisely, donated anonymously to causes I cared about, and continued living modestly. To my family, it appeared I had simply moved to a new position at a larger company, a lateral move at best in their estimation. As the months passed, I waited for someone in my family to ask meaningful questions about my work or show genuine interest in my life. They never did. Instead, the pattern of dismissal continued, setting the stage for the confrontation that had been brewing for 28 years. In the year following the acquisition, I maintained a middle-class lifestyle while secretly managing a fortune. My one-bedroom apartment was comfortable but ordinary. My simple, quality clothing lacked designer labels. Behind the scenes, my life had transformed dramatically. My investment portfolio grew under expert management. I established a foundation to support young women in STEM, operating anonymously as its benefactor. I even purchased a lakeside cabin in Vermont, my sanctuary from the pressure of maintaining appearances. My decision to conceal my wealth from my family wasn't made lightly. Part of me hoped that, without the distraction of money, they might finally see me, Haley the person, not Haley the disappointment. I wanted them to ask about my work because they were interested, not because they suspected it was lucrative. I wanted connection based on who I was, not what I had. This experiment was put to the test at every family gathering. At a 4th of July barbecue, my father patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Enjoying your work is a luxury, Haley. Real success means sacrifice. Look at your brother, he's been promoted twice. That's commitment to excellence." My mother would appear with a single man in tow, saying, "You're not getting any younger, dear." At my sister Brooke's birthday dinner, she proudly displayed the keys to her new Mercedes. "Maybe next year you can upgrade from that Honda if you get a real job." Even my grandmother, who had always been kinder than most, reflected the family's values. "Such a smart girl," she said. "But intelligence isn't everything, dear. Your cousin Jessica married that wonderful surgeon. Oh, she has that beautiful house in Beacon Hill." The consistent message was clear. In the Mason family, success meant visible wealth, status-appropriate marriage, and maintaining appearances. My chosen path held no value in their estimation. What they didn't know was that I had quietly become the family's most financially successful member. Tyler's 6-figure salary paled in comparison to the interest alone on my investments. Brooks' design business amounted to a rounding error on my quarterly returns. The irony grew even sharper when I discovered through my financial advisor that my father's investment firm, Mason Investment Group, had been underperforming for years. "Word is they're over-leveraged on some commercial properties," my advisor commented. Old school thinking in a new market. This information cast my father's persistent career advice in a new light. Was his insistence that I join a respectable firm more about his need to maintain appearances than actual concern for my future? The dynamic reached a new level of absurdity when my parents began asking me for small loans to help with various expenses. My mother called one afternoon. "Darling, I know you must be doing well enough at that tech company. Your father and I are a bit stretched this quarter with the renovations on the Cape House. Could you help out with $5,000? I sent the money, curious where this would lead." It led to more requests. $3,000 for a country club membership renewal. $7,500 for a cash flow issue with Tyler's condo purchase, $10,000 for Brooke's business expansion. None were repaid, and all came with the unspoken expectation that this was my duty as a family member, despite being the supposedly least successful one. Through my wealth management team, I discreetly investigated the family finances and discovered troubling patterns. My father's business was indeed struggling, over-leveraged on risky investments. My parents had remortgaged their home to maintain their lifestyle. Tyler was deeply in debt from trying to maintain a banker's lifestyle on an associate salary. Brooke's design business was operating in the red, sustained by parental subsidies. The most shocking discovery was that my father had been borrowing substantial sums from extended family members with increasingly unlikely promises of high returns. The Mason family's perceived prosperity was a carefully maintained facade, cracking under financial strain. I set up anonymous accounts to cover some family expenses, paying off my grandmother's mortgage through a bank error in her favor, establishing a scholarship that conveniently covered my cousin's college tuition, and even arranging for my parents' property taxes to be reassessed at a lower rate. I did all this while maintaining the appearance of my modest life and listening to their condescension about my career choices. The emotional toll of this double life grew heavier. "What are you really testing?" my therapist asked. "Whether they'll love you without the money, or whether they're capable of loving the real you at all." I had no answer, but as another Thanksgiving approached, I would soon find out. The annual Mason family Thanksgiving dinner was the centerpiece of our family traditions, a showcase of prosperity and status. Each year, my parents invited extended family and select friends to display the family's success and solidarity. Each year, I braced myself for the familiar pattern of dismissals and backhanded compliments. This year would be different, though I didn't know it yet. As I packed an overnight bag for the trip to my parents' home, I had no idea I was heading toward the confrontation that would finally break open the family's carefully constructed reality and my own. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold. I pulled up to my parents' sprawling colonial home in Wellesley. My reliable Honda looked conspicuously out of place among the luxury vehicles in the driveway, which I knew was exactly how my family viewed me. I took a deep breath, gathered a bottle of wine, rare vintage that cost more than most people's monthly rent, though the label was understated enough they would miss its significance, and headed toward the imposing front door. Inside, the house hummed with pre-dinner activity. Professional caterers were arranging appetizers on silver platters. The interior had been decorated to magazine perfection. "Haley, you made it." My mother greeted me with an air kiss. She took the wine with a cursory glance. "How thoughtful. I'll have Marta put this with the others." Before I could mention the wine's pedigree, she was already directing me toward the great room where family had gathered. "Everyone's here already. Your cousin Jennifer just got engaged to that wonderful surgeon from Boston General. Do try to mingle, darling." The great room was filled with relatives performing the annual ritual of competitive success stories. Tyler was describing a business deal, gesturing emphatically. The board practically begged me to lead the transition team, youngest VP in the firm's history. Nearby, Brooke was surrounded by female relatives admiring her 3-carat engagement ring. "We've reserved the botanical gardens for June," she was explaining. "The guest list is already at 300, but Daddy says we can't cut corners on an event of this importance." I moved through the room, exchanging polite greetings with relatives who regarded me with varying degrees of curiosity and pity. Cousin Jennifer, fresh from announcing her engagement, caught me by the appetizer table, still working with computers. "Was it?" she said, conspicuously displaying her engagement ring. "I heard you're still single." "My Richard has a friend in IT at the hospital. Not a doctor, of course, but he seems nice. Very stable job." This well-meaning condescension continued as I made my way around the room. Uncle Stephen asked if I had considered getting an MBA to get a real career started. Aunt Patricia wondered if my company offered good benefits at least, since the salary in those technical jobs can't be much. My grandmother patted my hand and said, "Some people bloom later in life. Dear, your cousin Michael didn't find his footing until nearly 40, and now he manages that wonderful sporting goods store. The consistent message was clear. In the Mason family, my chosen path held no value. My father made his entrance as dinner was about to be served, commanding the room's attention without effort. "Haley, glad you could make it," he said, his eyes already scanning the room for a more important conversation. "How's business?" I asked, genuinely curious. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "Expanding. We're positioned for a strong quarter. Speaking of business, have you reconsidered that banking position? The offer won't stay open forever." Before I could respond, the dinner bell rang, saving me from another conversation about my disappointing career choices. The dining room was a showcase of traditional elegance. I found my place card near the middle of the table, in the middle class section between a dental student and a pharmaceutical sales representative. As the first course was served, my father stood to offer the traditional Thanksgiving toast. These annual speeches typically followed a pattern: expressions of gratitude for the family's accomplishments with particular emphasis on recent successes. Another year of achievement for the Masons, he began raising his crystal glass. Grateful for continued success at Mason Investment Group despite challenging markets. Tyler has distinguished himself with his work on the Westridge merger. The youngest vice president in the firm's history to lead such a significant acquisition. A murmuring circle of approval met Tyler's acceptance of the praise. Brooke has not only expanded her design business to include 3 of Boston's most prestigious addresses, but has also secured her own future by accepting Christopher Whitman's proposal. Brooke beamed as relatives admired her ring again. He continued, acknowledging various relatives' accomplishments, then concluded his toast with, "To the continued prosperity and success of the Mason family, upholding our values of excellence and achievement." I waited for my name for some acknowledgement of my work or contribution. It never came. The slight was so obvious that I noticed uncomfortable glances from several relatives. Something shifted inside me at that moment. A lifetime of accumulated patience and understanding suddenly exhausted. I had built a revolutionary company, achieved financial success beyond anyone at this table, all while being treated as the family disappointment. I had quietly supported family members who simultaneously looked down on me. I had maintained a facade of modesty while testing whether my family could ever value me for myself. The answer was now painfully clear. As the main course was served, the conversation turned to Tyler's bonus and Brooke's wedding budget. My father was explaining the importance of maintaining appearances even when times are tight when I found myself speaking. "I sold my company last year for $188 million. Statement dropped into a momentary lull in conversation, causing an immediate and absolute silence. 24 pairs of eyes turned toward me in various states of confusion and disbelief. My father recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to dismissive amusement. "Haley, this isn't the time for jokes. We're discussing serious family matters." "I'm not joking," I replied, my voice steady. SecureFlow, the cybersecurity company I co-founded, was acquired by SecureTech Global. After taxes and distributing shares to our team, I personally netted $94 million. Another beat of silence, then nervous laughter from several relatives. My mother forced a tight smile. "Darling, we know you're doing fine in your technical job. There's no need for exaggeration." Tyler snorted into his wineglass. "Right? Because Silicon Valley is just throwing around 9-figure deals for little security apps. What did you really get? A nice bonus? A company car?" The condescension in his tone, so familiar, so expected, somehow hurt more than outright disbelief would have. I reached for my phone, pulled up my investment portfolio summary, and slid it toward my father. "This is my current net worth, excluding real estate holdings and my charitable foundation. You can verify every detail." The acquisition was reported in the Wall Street Journal. My father glanced at the phone, his expression freezing as he processed. The numbers on the screen. For once in his life, Richard Mason was speechless. That can't be right, he finally managed. But the uncertainty in his voice was telling. It's not only right, it's actually conservative. I continued, a lifetime of suppressed feelings finally breaking through. I've been living modestly. By choice, not necessity. Meanwhile, I've discovered that this family's finances aren't nearly as robust as everyone pretends. Dad's business has been struggling for years. This house has 2 mortgages. Tyler's successful career comes with crushing debt. Brooke's business operates at a loss. Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. My mother's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. Tyler's expression darkened dangerously. "How dare you?" my father said, his voice low and threatening. "You have no right to discuss private family finances." "I have every right," I countered, "considering I've been anonymously supporting this family for months." "Who do you think mysteriously paid off? Grandma's mortgage or covered?" "Tyler's margin call last quarter when his investments tanked." "Or quietly funded the anonymous donor who saved Brooke's business from bankruptcy." The silence that followed was deafening. My revelations had cracked the carefully maintained facade of Mason family prosperity, exposing the financial struggles they'd worked so hard to hide from each other and the world. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "That's enough," he thundered, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the crystal glasses jump. "I will not have you spreading lies and causing discord at my Thanksgiving table. If you can't support this family's values, perhaps you shouldn't be at this table at all." "Dad," Brooke interjected, her voice uncertain. "Maybe we should listen." "No," he cut her off. "I know my own business. I know this family's finances. Haley has always needed attention. But this performance crosses a line." He turned to me, years of disappointment hardening his gaze. "Either apologize for this disruption and these false accusations, or leave." In that moment, looking at my father's unyielding expression, I saw with perfect clarity that he would rather lose me than face the truth. My wealth, my success, none of it mattered if it didn't conform to his vision of achievement. My mother's silent complicity, Tyler's smug certainty. The uncomfortable expressions around the table all confirmed what I had suspected for years. I would never be valued for who I actually was in this family. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly. "I'll go." As I walked toward the door, I heard whispered arguments breaking out behind me. My grandmother called my name. Brooke half rose from her seat before my mother pulled her back down. No one else moved to stop me. In the grand foyer, I collected my coat from the hall closet. As I reached for the door, my father appeared behind me. "You've always been difficult, Haley," he said, his voice controlled but seething with anger. "When you're ready to be a proper part of this family and accept your place in it, you can return." I looked at him, really looked at the man who had shaped so much of my self-doubt, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. "My place," I echoed. "Dad, I've built something significant on my own terms. I've achieved exactly what you always claimed to value: financial success, independence, innovation. But because it didn't happen your way, in your industry, with your approval, it doesn't count." I opened the door, letting in a gust of cold November air. "I hope someday you can be proud of me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. But I'm done waiting for that day to come." As I walked to my car, the unassuming Honda that had been part of my cover, I made a decision. By morning, my family would understand exactly what they had done. The anonymous financial support that had been quietly sustaining their lifestyle was about to disappear. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and swirling emotions. I had finally done it. After years of quiet achievement and patient understanding, I had shattered the family mythology. The fallout would be significant, but I couldn't bring myself to regret my actions. Some truths needed to be spoken, even if they destroyed carefully maintained illusions. When I reached my apartment, I bypassed the modest one-bedroom unit I maintained for appearances and took the private elevator to the penthouse I actually owned. Spacious, beautifully appointed space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Here, away from judgmental eyes, I allowed myself to live in accordance with my actual means. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of the same rare vintage I'd brought to dinner, and called the one person who would understand the magnitude of what had just happened. "You finally told them," Jason said when I finished recounting the evening. "My former business partner and the only person who knew both my financial status and family." Dynamics immediately grasped the significance. "I did," I said, "and I got kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner for my trouble. How did it feel telling the truth after all this time?" he asked. I considered the question, watching the city lights twinkle below. It's terrifying, liberating, Sadal, at once. "And what now?" Kay asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Now," I said, "resolution forming. I stop enabling their delusions. It's time for some financial reality to match the truth I've spoken." After ending the call, I opened my laptop and composed an email to my financial advisor, Jonathan Wells. He responded within minutes to my urgent message. "This is substantial," he said when we connected on a video call. "You're talking about unwinding multiple support structures you've put in place for your family members. Are you certain about this decision?" "I am," I confirmed, "not as punishment, but as necessity. My family has been living beyond their means, hiding financial problems from each other and maintaining appearances at all costs. I've been enabling that by anonymously covering gaps. It needs to stop for their sake as much as mine." Over the next 2 hours, Jonathan and I systematically reviewed and modified the various financial arrangements I had established to support my family. The monthly transfers to my parents' household account would cease immediately. The anonymous donor fund that had been quietly covering my brother Tyler's margin calls and credit card minimums would be closed. The arts grant that supplemented my sister Brooke's design business would be terminated. The family trust I had established to cover my grandmother's medical expenses would continue, but be restructured to pay providers directly rather than through my father's management. By midnight, the financial safety net I had spun beneath my struggling family had been systematically dismantled. They would not immediately understand what had happened or why certain automatic payments and mysterious financial windfalls had suddenly stopped, but the effects would become apparent within days. "There's one more thing," I told Jonathan as we prepared to conclude our call. "I want a complete audit of my father's business dealings involving family members. I have reason to believe he's been borrowing extensively from relatives with promises of returns he can't deliver." Jonathan's expression turned serious. "If you're suggesting what I think you are, that moves beyond family drama into potential securities violations, depending on how he structured these loans." "I know," I said. "That's why I need complete information before deciding next steps." Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my penthouse, alternating between certainty that I had done the right thing and waves of guilt about the chaos I had unleashed. The conditioning of a lifetime: put family first, maintain appearances, never aired dirty laundry ward, with my adult understanding that those values had enabled dysfunction and denied authentic connection. Morning brought no clarity, only the certainty that events had been set in motion that couldn't be reversed. I silenced my phone after the 20th missed call from various family members and threw myself into work, reviewing security protocols for SecureTech's newest clients with an intensity that made my colleagues exchange concerned glances. It took exactly 3 days for the financial reality to hit my family. 3 days of ignored calls and messages with increasingly desperate tones. 3 days of reports from Jonathan as various automatic payments failed and accounts registered insufficient funds. On the 4th day, the preliminary audit results arrived, confirming my worst suspicions. My father had indeed been borrowing. substantial sums from family members with increasingly unlikely promises of high returns. The Mason Investment Group was leveraged far beyond prudent limits, and the exclusive investment opportunities he had offered relatives were little more than a shell game, using new investments to pay returns on older ones while maintaining the illusion of profitability. It wasn't technically a Ponzi scheme, Jonathan explained, but it operated in the gray area just short of illegal. Unethical, certainly, and devastating to the family members who had trusted their financial security. To your father's reputation, this discovery hardened my resolve. What I had initially seen as simple status-seeking and dismissiveness now appeared as something more sinister. My father hadn't just undervalued me. He had potentially been counting on me, the family underachiever, to eventually come around and inject capital into a struggling enterprise. The texts and voicemails from family members told the unfolding story of financial chaos. From my mother, initially indignant, "Your father is very upset. Call immediately." Then, increasingly concerned, "There seems to be some issue with the household accounts. Call me." From Tyler, aggressive, then panicked, "Whatever game you're playing stops now. My cards are all declining. What did you do?" From Brooke, confused, then tearful, "Mom and Dad are fighting constantly. Please call back." On day 5, my father's business partner, William Hayes, contacted me directly. "Haley, we need to talk," he said, when I finally answered. "Richard, isn't himself the firm is facing challenges? He mentioned you might have resources that could help stabilize the situation." "Did he explain how I might have come by these resources?" I asked. Hayes hesitated. "He said something about your tech. Job paying off better than expected." "Look, the details aren't important. What matters is this is your family's legacy at stake." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Even now, my father couldn't bring himself to acknowledge the truth of my success. I was still just the daughter with a tech job who might mysteriously have funds to bail out the family firm. "I'll consider the situation," I said neutrally. "But I'll need complete financial transparency before discussing any form of assistance." By the end of the week, family chaos had reached a fever pitch. My grandmother called, her voice shaking, to tell me that my parents were having a serious disagreement and my father had moved to a hotel. Brooke reported that her wedding venue had called about a return deposit check. Tyler's girlfriend had apparently moved out after discovering his financial situation wasn't what he'd claimed. The family emergency meeting was inevitable. It was called for Sunday afternoon at my parents' home, organized by my Aunt Patricia, who had assumed the role of family mediator. The text announcement was carefully worded to focus on recent family concerns and ensuring mutual support, avoiding direct mention of financial issues or my Thanksgiving revelations. I wasn't explicitly invited, but my grandmother's separate message made it clear my presence was expected. After careful consideration, I decided to attend, not to gloat or punish, but to finally establish truth as the foundation for any future relationship with my family. I would bring documentation, proof of SecureFlow's acquisition, records of the financial support I had provided, and the audit findings about my father's business practices. The truth would be difficult for everyone to hear, but continuing to live in carefully constructed fiction had caused too much damage already. Whatever came next, reconciliation or permanent estrangement, would at least be based in reality. As I prepared for the confrontation ahead, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. For the first time in my adult life, I would be entering a family gathering as my authentic self. It was time for the Mason family to finally see me clearly, and for me to see them clearly in return. The atmosphere in my parents' living room that Sunday afternoon was unlike any previous family gathering. The carefully curated cheese platters, the gentle classical music, all were gone. Instead, tension hung in the air like a physical presence. Family members sat in tense clusters, conversations dropping to whispers when others approached. I arrived, precisely at the designated time, wearing a simple but well-tailored navy suit. Professional, understated but unmistakably expensive. The slim briefcase I carried contained all the documentation I had prepared. My entrance created an immediate ripple effect. Conversations halted mid-sentence. My mother, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, half froze from her seat, then sank back down. My sister Brooke rushed toward me with visible relief. "You came," Brooke said, embracing me with unexpected warmth. "Everything's falling apart, Haley." Before I could respond, my Aunt Patricia approached, assuming her role as mediator. "Haley, we didn't know if you'd join us, given recent events." Her eyes kept darting to my briefcase with undisguised curiosity. "I thought it was important to be here." I replied simply, "Where's Dad?" "In his study," my mother answered, approaching with visible hesitation. "He's reviewing some papers before joining us." The subtext was clear. My father was avoiding the initial confrontation, perhaps preparing his own defense. My grandmother beckoned me to the seat beside her on the sofa. "I always knew you were special, dear," she whispered, though I admit I never imagined quite how special. After 15 minutes of uncomfortable small talk, my father finally emerged from his study. The man who entered now retained the physical attributes of Richard Mason, but had somehow diminished. His posture lacked its usual authority. T's eyes held a weariness I'd never seen before. Our eyes met across the room in a moment of silent recognition. For perhaps the first time in my life, my father saw me not as his disappointing middle child, but as an equal player in the unfolding family drama. "Let's get started," he said, his voice betraying none of the uncertainty his appearance suggested. "We have family matters to discuss." Aunt Patricia outlined the purpose of the meeting in carefully diplomatic terms. "Recent events have created some confusion about the family's financial situation. We're here to clarify misunderstandings and determine how to move forward united as a family." My father spoke next, addressing the room with a shadow of his usual authority. "I know many of you have questions about Mason Investment Group and various family financial arrangements. I want to assure everyone that despite some temporary cash flow issues, the firm remains fundamentally sound." He continued with a well-practiced speech about weathering economic storms, skillfully avoiding specifics while projecting confidence. It was the same technique I'd seen him employ at countless dinner parties. "What about the investment returns? You promised last quarter." My Uncle Robert finally interrupted. "My statement showed significant losses." "And the beach house purchase you advised me on," added my mother's sister. "The bank is saying the financing fell through because of credit issues, but I liquidated my retirement account for the down payment based on your guidance." As more relatives began voicing specific concerns, my father's practiced composure began to crack. Then he played his final card, the one I had anticipated. "Of course, recent family developments may provide an opportunity to accelerate our recovery," he said, his gaze shifting deliberately toward me. "It seems our Haley has had some financial success she's been keeping to herself. Perhaps now would be the time for her to demonstrate family loyalty by helping stabilize the situation." The naked manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Even after everything, he was attempting to reframe my success as a resource for his rescue, my independence, as a family obligation. The room's attention shifted to me. This was the moment I had prepared for, not to shame or punish, but to finally establish truth as our baseline. I opened my briefcase and removed the first document, the official acquisition agreement for SecureFlow. "Before we discuss family loyalty and obligations," I said, my voice steady as I handed the document to my Aunt Patricia to circulate, "I think we need clarity about what's actually happening. This is the acquisition agreement for the company I co-founded. As you can see, the sale price was $188 million. My personal share after taxes and distributions to our team was $94 million. Murmurs spread through the room as the document was passed from hand to hand. This next document, I continued, removing a bound financial report, is an independent audit of Mason Investment Group conducted this week by Deloitte, at my request. It shows that the firm has been operating at a significant loss for the past 3 years, with client investments used to cover operating expenses and family withdrawals. My father's face flushed with anger. You had no right to investigate my business. Not when they involve family members' investments, I countered calmly. Not when you've been using my grandmother's retirement funds to cover your country? Club membership. This revelation caused a fresh wave of shocked murmurs. I produced more documents, records of the anonymous financial support I had provided to various family members. The manipulative requests for loans, evidence of my parents, mortgage defaults that I had quietly covered. For the past year, I explained to the stunned room. I've been anonymously supporting many of you financially while being treated as the family failure. I did this because, despite everything, I care about this family. But I can't continue enabling a system built on appearances, deception, and status, rather than genuine connection and truth. So you're cutting us off as punishment. My mother interjected, finding her voice. Because we didn't praise you enough. No, I said gently. I'm establishing boundaries and reality. I'm happy to help family members who truly need support, grandmas. Medical expenses, legitimate education costs for cousins, even emergency assistance in a true crisis. But I won't fund luxury lifestyles, status competitions, or dad's failing business ventures while being treated as somehow less valuable than everyone else in this room. Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly erupted. This is rich coming from you. You sit on your millions in secret, judging us, playing some twisted game to test if we're worthy of knowing about your success. How is that not manipulative? This question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. You're right, I acknowledged after a moment. Keeping my success secret was partly a test I desperately wanted this family to pass. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I have. That was unfair, and I own that mistake. This admission seemed to shift something in the room's atmosphere. My candor had introduced a new element to the family dynamic. Vulnerability paired with accountability. My father, however, was not ready to concede. This performance is all very dramatic, Haley, but it doesn't change the reality of our situation. The family business, the legacy your grandfather built, is at risk. Whatever grievances you think you have about not getting enough attention growing up, surely you don't want to be responsible for destroying generations of work. It was his final attempt at manipulation, invoking family legacy and placing the burden of his failures on my shoulders. In the past, it might have worked, but that Haley was gone. The legacy is already destroyed, Dad. I said, my voice gentle but firm. You did that when you started using family funds as your personal ATM? When you prioritized appearances over truth? When you taught us that our value was tied to external markers of success rather than character or genuine achievement? I turned to address the entire room, willing to help establish a family fund with reasonable oversight and transparent management, not controlled by any single family member, to address legitimate needs and education costs. I'm willing to help those who want to start fresh with clear boundaries and expectations. But I'm not writing blank checks for anyone, and I'm not investing in businesses or lifestyles built on deception. The next 2 hours were chaotic, emotional, and occasionally ugly. Alliances shifted visibly as relatives calculated their positions in the new family order. Some approached me with tearful apologies and sudden recognition of my amazing business acumen. Others huddled with my father, shooting me resentful glances. My mother vacillated between anger at my public exposure of family secrets and strategic consideration of her options now that her husband's financial house of cards had collapsed. I always encouraged your education, she said at one point, a transparent attempt to rewrite history that I let pass without comment. Brooke surprised me by publicly breaking from our parents' position. Haley's right, she announced, removing her enormous engagement ring. This whole family is built on appearances. I don't even love Christopher. I just knew he would make Mom and Dad happy. I'm done living for their approval. Tyler maintained his anger the longest. I still think how you did this was wrong, he said stiffly, but I can't deny the business is in trouble. Has been for years. Dad kept saying we just needed to maintain confidence until the market turned around. And you believed him because that's what we were all trained to do. I replied, seeing my brother clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as the golden child, but as another victim of our father's value system. By evening's end, the family had fractured into new configurations. My father remained unrepentant, retreating to his study and refusing further discussion. Several relatives were exploring legal options regarding their investments. As I prepared to leave, my grandmother pulled me aside. Your grandfather would be proud of you, she said quietly, not because of the money. He never cared much for that, despite what your father claims. But because you had the courage to speak truth, even when it was painful. I drove away from my childhood home that evening with no illusions about easy resolutions or fairy tale reconciliations. Some relationships might be permanently damaged. Others might eventually transform into healthier connections. The family would never be the same, and that was necessary, even if painful. What I felt most strongly as I left the Mason family estate was not triumph or vindication, but something quieter and more profound, the lightness that comes with finally setting down a burden carried too long. For the first time in my life, I had shown my full self to my family, strengths, flaws, boundaries, and all. And while the aftermath was messy and uncertain, it was finally refreshingly real. 6 months after the family confrontation that appended generations of Mason family dynamics, I stood on the back deck of my Vermont lake house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of amber and gold. The property, 3 acres of woodlands surrounding a modern yet cozy home, had been my sanctuary during the months of family upheaval. Here, 2 hours from Boston, I had created a space that reflected my true self, comfortable technologically, cutting edge, yet warm and inviting. Unlike my parents' showpiece homes designed to impress visitors, this place was built around my actual preferences and needs. The journey to this healthier perspective hadn't been straightforward. In the immediate aftermath of the family confrontation, I had swung between vindication and guilt, between relief at speaking my truth and anxiety about the consequences. My therapist, Dr. Miranda Chin, had been crucial in helping me process these complex emotions and establish a framework for moving forward. Boundaries aren't punishment, she had reminded me repeatedly. They're the foundation of healthy relationships. You can love your family while still requiring respect and honesty. This principle had guided my selective reconnection with family, members who demonstrated genuine remorse and a desire for an authentic relationship. My grandmother had been the first and easiest reconnection. I watched your father turn the business into a status competition, she told me during one of our regular Sunday afternoon tea sessions. Your grandfather built that company to support the family, not to be the family's identity. Richard never understood the difference. My sister Brooke had surprised everyone with her capacity for change. After the family meeting, she not only broke her engagement, but had moved into a modest apartment, enrolled in community college classes, and begun volunteering at a local women's shelter. I've been playing a part my whole life, she confessed. During our first tentative lunch, I don't even know who I actually am or what I really want. Our relationship had transformed from distant, competitive siblings to something approaching genuine friendship. She had even started working at my foundation, wanting to earn her way rather than simply receive financial support. I watched you build something real, she explained. I want that feeling too, even if my path looks different. Tyler's journey had been more complicated. His identity had been so thoroughly entwined with our father's value system that the revelations had triggered a genuine existential crisis. After initially doubling down on resentment, he had disappeared to a wellness retreat in Arizona, returning 3 months later with a humility I'd never witnessed in my confident older brother. I don't know how to exist in a world where everything I valued turns out to be meaningless, he admitted during a tense but honest dinner at my apartment. My whole life was about chasing Dad's definition of success. Our relationship remained tentative, but I recognized in his confusion my own earlier struggles to define success on my terms. I offered not financial support, but something potentially more valuable: connections to career counselors who specialized in helping people align careers with authentic values. My relationship with our mother had developed into a careful dance. With my father's business collapse and their subsequent separation, she had lost not just financial security, but her sense of purpose and position. "I don't know how to be just Diane," she confessed during a rare moment of candor. "I've been Mrs. Richard Mason for so long." Watching my mother struggle to reconstruct her identity at 62 was both painful and illuminating. Her journey reinforced my determination to build a life based on authentic connections rather than external validation. My father remained the most distant family relationship. Richard Mason had retreated to a smaller home outside Boston, running what remained of Mason Investment Group with a skeleton staff. He had aged visibly in the months since Thanksgiving, his trademark confidence replaced by a brittle defensiveness. Our only direct contact had been a terse business meeting with attorneys present to formalize the separation of family finances and establish the independent family foundation I had created. "I built everything I had for this family," he had stated as the meeting concluded. "Remember that, whatever you think of me." I had responded with the simple truth: "I know you did what you thought was right, Dad. I just needed to do the same." Whether we would ever rebuild a meaningful relationship remained uncertain. I had left the door open, but with clear conditions: respect for my boundaries, acknowledgement of past behaviors, and a willingness to relate as adults rather than through his expectations of parental authority. Beyond family recalibration, these months had been transformative for how I approached my wealth and success. The Secure Flow acquisition had made me wealthy beyond ordinary imagination. But the family drama had clarified that money was simply a tool, its impact determined by how it was used. I had established the Mason Technology Access Foundation with a $20 million initial endowment, focused on providing scholarships and mentorship to overlooked tech students from middle and lower-income backgrounds. The foundation specifically sought candidates who, like my younger self, showed promise but lacked family support or connections. Success shouldn't depend on who believes in you at home, I explained at the foundation's launch event. Sometimes talent needs only opportunity and a single person who sees its potential. My professional life had evolved as well. After completing my contractual consulting period with SecureTech, I had begun selectively investing in promising tech startups with a particular focus on companies founded by women and minorities. Unlike traditional venture capital, my investment approach emphasized sustainable growth over quick returns and founder well-being alongside profit potential. My personal circle had transformed completely. Gone were the obligatory social connections maintained for family appearances. Instead, I had cultivated relationships with people who knew me as Haley the person, not Haley the Mason or Haley the millionaire. My roommate Alicia remained my closest friend. Jason, my Secure Flow co-founder, was a regular presence in my life. I had even begun a promising relationship with Daniel Park, an architectural engineer I'd met through a foundation event who valued my mind and heart far more than my financial status. "What I appreciate most about you isn't what you've achieved, impressive as that is," Daniel had said during our third date. "It's how you've remained grounded despite everything. That takes a different kind of strength." As the sunset deepened over the lake, casting long shadows across the deck, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. The Thanksgiving confrontation that had seemed so catastrophic had actually been the necessary breaking point, the moment when truth finally overwhelmed the family mythology. painful, but ultimately liberating. The Mason family would never return to its previous configuration, and that was not a failure, but a necessary evolution. Some relationships had strengthened through honesty. Others had revealed themselves as too rooted in dysfunction to survive authenticity. New connections had formed based on mutual respect rather than obligation or status. My phone chimed with a notification, a reminder about tomorrow's foundation board meeting where we would review the first round of scholarship recipients. Among them was a young woman from rural Michigan whose application essay had brought tears. To my eyes, no one in my family understands why I'm obsessed with coding instead of pursuing a real job, she had written. But I know this is where I belong. I smiled, thinking of the opportunity awaiting her and the others. Not just financial support, but membership in a community that valued their unique gifts. Whatever challenges they faced with family expectations or societal pressures, they wouldn't face them alone. My own journey was far from complete. Establishing healthy boundaries, living authentically, building relationships based on genuine connection. These were ongoing practices, not destination points. There would be setbacks and difficult days ahead, especially as family dynamics continued to evolve. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was moving forward as my complete self. Neither hiding my achievements nor defining myself solely through them. Success, I had finally understood, wasn't measured by account balances or family approval, but by the courage to live truthfully and the capacity to create meaningful impact. The last light faded from the sky, stars emerging in the clear Vermont night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. For tonight, I allowed myself to simply be present in this moment of hard-won peace. Grateful for the difficult journey that had led me here. If my story resonates with you, I hope it encourages you to define success on your own terms and surround yourself with people who value you for who you truly are. Not what you have or what role you play in their narrative. Sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the most necessary growth. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family to protect your authentic self? Share your experience in the comments. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please subscribe for more stories of personal transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you, but by the truth you know about yourself.